The four of us will then stay on the Zoom call after the video ends, and we will be on hand to answer any questions you have tonight. And so we look forward to that part as well. I'm hoping when I share my screen, the goal is that you will see a presentation on the left with 3 images, Karen and Jerry at the top, myself in the middle, Emily at the bottom. So hopefully that works. And here we go. Let me. Library. I'm Michelle Finn. I work in the Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Division. With me today is my esteemed colleague, Emily Morey, and our friends, Karen and Jerry Bunton. The four of us are here to discuss an exhibit we put together for the library based on a collection of family artifacts that Karen and Jerry brought to us a few years back, encouraged by their friend, Lisa Clemon. The collection includes photographs, programs and certificates, news clippings, Boy Scout memorabilia, World War II artifacts, genealogical charts, and other items representing 150 years of Karen's family's history in the Rochester area, since her great-great-grandfather moved here from Virginia in the 1870s. So Karen and Jerry, when we first discussed the significance of this collection and the stories that we wanted to tell from it, the two of you mentioned to me that one of the things you wanted to convey was that the Dinkles are, quote, just an ordinary family that moves along. And I was wondering if you would please say a bit more about that idea, as well as what inspired you to bring your family's collection to us at the library in the first place.
Well, I was thinking about after the death of my father in November of 2002, the beginning of 2003, I told Jerry that, we need to start going through, all of his stuff, because we had about 15 totes. And so, we started, but then we thought about Lisa. I said, Lisa would be good for this, and, to help us, and so forth. So anyhow, to make a long story short, she was more than willing to come over and help us with that. And then it was her idea to share it with the library. And I thought it was awesome, I said, because, we've never been in the library, on display or anything. And so, it went forth from that point on.
Yeah, I'm glad that she suggested that. Were you surprised? Did you have any moment of like?
Yes.
Can you talk a bit more about that?
I had when they say I had an awe moment, where, is this really happening? Is this really happening to us, And, I had really had to thank Jerry, because he's into a lot of this stuff. And he helped, a lot, even after Lisa, Lisa came, I think was it a year? Just about every week, and I, every week I was just, I just couldn't believe it. And then the things that we went through and seen, it's like, have I seen these before? And I've never paid any attention to it. Did my father get all of these awards when he was in the Scouts or when he was in the Army, and so forth. So, yes, I definitely had an awe moment. I think we both did.
Jerry, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it was just good to see the exhibit, because normally when you see exhibits at the library or in public educational places, it's usually about people who are in the news and people who are famous and everything. And here we had an ordinary family who, through their just living every day, showed a lot of leadership in the community, and they helped a lot of people. And that's one of the things we have to do, is we have to look to the people that are in our own homes Instead of looking for heroes that are made by the media or whatever, it's those that provide the service without all the fanfare, whether it's organizing a Boy Scout troop in an inner city neighborhood, or whether it's simply serving their country in various ways. So also it validated my inability to throw anything away.
Fair enough. So yeah, thank you both for that. I feel like that theme of ordinariness and sort of extraordinariness in the ordinariness hits at the heart of this exhibit. So I really appreciate you fleshing that out for us. This idea that because the Dinkles were average, everyday people, as we've chosen for the title of the exhibit, we're able to see ourselves and our own families reflected in their experiences in a way that we don't necessarily do when it is those loftier figures as we're used to thinking of them and seeing them. And that these everyday people are also shaping history. They are the history makers just as much as the people out in the spotlight. And their experiences are intersecting with key moments in American history. And so some examples of that intersection come from the family's collection. You can see John Dinkle's life after moving from Virginia to Western New York gives us a sense of what Northern migration might have entailed for the many African Americans who left the South in the wake of the Civil War. John's daughter, Irene, moved from the rural area of Wheatland into the city of Rochester at a time when the country's identity was similarly shifting from rural to urban. And Irene's son, Jonathan Theorius, made local headlines for his athletic accomplishments in an era when American reformers were stressing public health and fitness. So these things that the family was doing and experiencing just by living their lives are reflecting this wider history that we find in our textbooks. And so I think that's really part of the value of this as well. The Dinkles are these average, relatable people, and they help us to understand what life was really like at these moments in time. And more specifically, they help us to understand what life was like for African Americans at these moments in time. Since conventional narratives have centered and continue to center the experiences of white people for the most part, the family's race adds another layer of significance to the stories that this collection reveals to us. Rather than being marginalized, the Dinkle family's experiences and the history that they reflect are now front and center. Thanks to you two, Karen and Jerry, and Lisa, for bringing them to our attention. So you've helped us expand the historical narrative in a really important way and deepen our understanding of the past. So we owe you a lot for that. Thank you.
Thank you for putting the
Yes.
exhibit together.
That's awesome.
Now we'd like to turn a bit to the neighborhood where the Dinkles lived for many, many years. So the Dinkles settled in the 3rd Ward, which is the neighborhood we now call Cornhill, back in the 1930s. And this was Rochester's oldest African-American neighborhood. It was where Reverend Thomas James established the first Black church in the city, Memorial AME Zion. And it was and still is home to Clarissa Street, which in the 20th century really became the sort of heart of the Rochester African-American community, because quite a few Black-owned businesses established themselves on this street. So there was, everything from grocery stores, hotels, barber shops, salons, the Latimer Funeral Home, as well as a very famous local jazz club, the Pithod Club. And this is also the street and area where Jonathan T. Dinkle established Dinkle's taxi service in the 1940s. And this was the first Black-owned taxi cab business in the city. It's important to note that Black Rochesterians ended up settling in this neighborhood of the 3rd Ward as well as the 7th Ward because they were prevented from living in other neighborhoods in the area. Folks state and federal housing laws and real estate practices basically legalized housing segregation in the 20th century. You had things called racial covenants, which were clauses written into land deeds which prevented homes from being sold to Black people in places like Brighton, for example. Also, banks at the time were less likely to provide home loans to folks wanting to buy homes in neighborhoods that were majority Black, because these were deemed areas that were risky for insuring mortgages. So because of these racist practices, African Americans in our area did end up settling in the 3rd Ward and also the 7th Ward, as I mentioned before. But though they were geographically restricted by these racist practices, local African Americans nevertheless created thriving communities in places like the 3rd Ward. So Jerry and Karen, if you could tell us a bit about what it was like to grow up in the 3rd Ward, what kind of a sense of community was there?
Yeah. Well, I'll speak a little bit on it. I was born on Atkinson Street, which is right off of Clarissa Street. And the picture that's up there now is my mother and father. And I believe it's, that they're holding either my older brother or myself. And I noticed in the picture how old the buggies are, that they used to push the babies in. But anyhow, we moved from the Atkinson Street to Edinburgh Street. And it was awesome. We knew everybody. We knew our neighbors. We knew them so well, that my parents and them, they would borrow a cup of sugar, a cup of flour, And also, if you heard of the saying that your neighbor would tell on you, and they would believe them. And well, this didn't happen in my neighborhood, but I think I got it from Jerry that down south in the neighborhood, if you acted up and your neighbors seen it, they could whip you, and then send you home and tell your parents. But anyhow, it was just awesome, and to look back at it, I really enjoyed coming up, at that time. We lived in a double house, and it was next to my aunt, which was my mother's sister, and her husband and 2 girls. And we just grew up together, and we've been sisters all of this time. We just lost a sister just back in 2016, but we've been, that close that, we've been sisters. But it was just awesome, knowing your neighbors, and you followed through, like when we grew up, we still stayed in contact with them and their children and so forth. So, that was something that, I really enjoyed a lot. I can say that, I grew up in a family, that didn't have much, but we had the necessities. And my dad, I remember, my dad didn't like to go grocery shopping, like you go grocery shopping for a week or 2 weeks or so. And he would always bring dinner home on his way home from work. And the store, he used to go to the corner store and get stuff, and then my mother would cook when he, got home. And we had to eat our vegetables, we had to. Sure. But, it was very enjoyable. I have to say that, my childhood and the experiences that I went through were very good. I have nothing to complain about.
That's you really get a sense of, it's a real tight-knit community. It's like, it's an extended family almost in the neighborhood that, you're not blood relations, but you're still so connected and mutually supportive with your neighbors.
Yes, very much.
The old 3rd Ward was like a small village, and everyone in the village knew each other. And they took care of each other. They looked out for each other. And for us kids, we didn't realize we were being segregated. We just knew that we were around all of our friends, our classmates. The school was right down the street. And it was a small, compact neighborhood, but there was everything. There was the Scouts. There was Scotty's marching band, which
Oh, yes.
Dan's Tavern, which
My Uncle Dan went to all the time.
well, he went to it because he owned it. And we later found out that it was listed in the Green Book as one of the safest places in Rochester, one of the few places in Rochester for a Black traveler to come and be treated with dignity and respect. And also the YMCA had its colored branch in the neighborhood that was phased out to the, you know, general YMCA, but that had been there too. And there was, you know, ball playing, ball teams, various teams and stuff like that. So for us kids, it was a great place, and it was a safe place.
That's wonderful. When that you're sort of leading into the next topic we wanted to touch on, because you know, given the strength of the African American community in neighborhoods like the Third Ward, but also because of the challenges that members of these communities were facing, you know, Rochester has seen quite a lot of civil rights activism in its history. You know, the city saw the anti-slavery movement flourish here under the leadership of figures like Frederick Douglass in the 19th century. And then in the 20th century, you had the establishment of regional chapters of national organizations like the NAACP, the formation of local organizations like the Afro-American Cooperative League. And then this activism really surged in the 1960s following the urban uprising of July 1964. And that three-day event really marked the culmination of years and years of frustration over inequalities in housing and unemployment and employment, as well as law enforcement practices and education. And this uprising really spurred the establishment of quite a few activist groups in the city. The most famous one would be FIGHT, which was established in 1965. They fought housing discrimination as well as employment discrimination. They famously battled Kodak over its hiring practices. And another lesser known group was also established in 1965 by Karen's aunt Doris Price, called Your Neighbors. So Karen and Jerry, were you yourselves involved at all in local civil rights activism, or do you recall your family's involvement in activist groups or any particular events?
Well, I do remember my aunt, which lived next door, and she was very much heavily involved in it. And actually, she had opened up a Black American bookstore. It was an Afro-American bookstore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, you know, not knowing Jerry at the time, but, you know, when we would speak about it, you know, he would say that, you know, he went to her bookstore, you know, and yes, my mother wasn't involved, or my father wasn't involved in any of it. My mother, my dad, I would say, was busy, you know, doing other things, you know, the Scouts and the Army and so forth. But my mother wasn't involved because she had a fear of something happening. And she was always worrying about her sister, you know. And I was like that too. I was like that back then. And, you know, in a lot of ways, a little bit, I am like that now, you know. But yes, and I think Jerry can speak on this, you know, that what he thought about, you know, the bookstore and the things that went on and what she was involved in.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess I've been involved in protests for most of my life, because when I went to Edison Tech, which was on the other side of town, Their theme song, their school fight song was the Georgia Tech song, except they changed the wording to Edison Tech. And I refused to sing it. And the music teacher asked why, and I said, because why would I sing this song of some school I can't go to? And he wasn't aware that Black people weren't allowed at that time to go to Georgia Tech. And I had always been aware of where I could go and I couldn't go because my father every week would send me down to the corner to get the Jet Book, which was a small Black magazine that provided national news and commentary. And so from the time that I could read, I learned about what was going on in the country as far as discrimination or advances that was happening. And after the 11th grade, I refused to stand for the flag because everyone was supposed to stand and salute the flag, but I didn't think the flag was being, with the things that were going on, I didn't think the flag was being representative of my folks. So Doris was my hero.
Really?
Because Doris and Ted Price had established a real estate company office, and they were in the early 50s buying houses and selling houses and trying to integrate various neighborhoods. And they were also fighting with the banks on mortgages, because at the time, most people were buying houses, Black people were buying houses on land contracts, which means the owner would hold the mortgage, you would pay weekly your rent plus part of the mortgage. And if you missed a payment, you lost everything. So that you developed no equity in the house that you were buying, even if you were buying it for years. So that was another thing they were fighting against, as well as the restrictive covenants in the laws, because I guess in the 40s they had been outlawed, but they continued to go until the late 60s. And Doris opened a bookstore that specialized in African American books and memorabilia, and I went there and we fell in love. It was funny because she was one of the hardest people to get to know, but she was full of love for our community, you know, and she didn't take a lot of guff. You know, if you came in and you wanted one of those stupid books that they were pumping out, like Iceberg Slim and the pimp culture and all that other stuff, she'd tell you, just go to the garbage can and look and see if you find it there, because that's all it is. But she would point you to a book that would explain how exploitive the pimp culture was. So she was my hero.
Wow, that's so incredible. And you know, she's clearly in a lot of ways ahead of her time here in Rochester. You know, that involvement not just in trying to combat, you know, real estate legislation that was inequitable, but also focusing on the cultural fight, you know, through books and education. And I just wanted to point out, you know, on this PowerPoint slide here, that is Doris Price sitting in the audience of Malcolm X's speech that he gave in February 1965. That was the last speech he actually gave before he was assassinated in New York City. Were either of you at that talk by any chance?
No, I was trying to get to New York. It was funny. I was trying to make enough money to get to New York to get to the mosque to hear Malcolm X, and he was next door to my future wife's house, because he was over at after the talk that they gave, he was over at Doris's house.
Wow.
I found out later. But
and sitting there by my side, sitting next to my aunt is Constant Mitchell.
Yeah, that's Connie Mitchell.
Wow.
Yeah, we were my family and Doris's family, you know, they were very good and close friends. Matter of fact, I think she just passed away probably, you know, just a few years back. She was also well known, you know, in the neighborhood and in the community.
And first member of the Old County Board of Supervisors, African American member of the Old County Board of Supervisors, which is the Monroe County Legislature now.
I'm curious, actually, that other photo you had up a little bit ago with the march. So aren't these some familiar faces in the front?
The lady in the white trench coat is Muriel Dinkle. That's Karen's mother.
So I was going to call you on that, Karen, because you said your mom wasn't terribly active, which I can appreciate, that for the most part.
I don't remember how they managed to get her, you know, to do it, but she did. And then in the striped coat on the right-hand side is Aunt Doris's daughter, Sandra, and she lives out in California. But yes, they were very much involved. You know, the two girls were involved. But, they couldn't get our family much involved.
Do you remember this march, though?
No, I don't remember it. No.
Yeah, it culminated down at the Public Safety Building, and that's where other people from other parts of the
Was that
city.
the Solid March?
Yeah.
Does she have to have a permit for that one?
She had the permit, had to get a permit from the city for the march itself.
And actually, I have, well, Jerry said you have it, but I was thinking about, you know, the permit that she had to have for that. And I said, Jerry, I said, it would be nice if we could just find that. But he said he thought maybe, you know, you had it, you know.
We might, yeah, we can look for that.
Within that stuff that was that permit. And I thought that was awesome, you know, to still have that, you know.
Absolutely. And just for the folks at home, the Silent March was in response to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that was a local protest march organized by members of the Dinkle family and their relatives that we're talking about with this photo. So in addition to civil rights activism, one of the things that really resonates when you're looking through the exhibit and the collection that you've brought to us was how engaged the family, the entire family, from John Dinkle on down to you, Karen, has been in the community, just community activism in general, community engagement, and public service. So I wanted to talk a bit more about that and sort of note some of the high points of that, starting with John Dinkle, who, as we mentioned, is the one who moved up from Virginia, settled in nearby Wheatland. He served his community 2 terms as a town constable, which is an elected position. He was parade marshal for the county's annual Emancipation Day celebrations. And he marched in the parade for the unveiling of the Frederick Douglass Monument in 1899. And upon his death, I came across a newspaper article that eulogized him as, quote, a man who held the respect and confidence of the community at large. And it really speaks to this precedent that John set for the rest of the family, because subsequent generations have carried on this legacy of good citizenship that he established in the area. So here we see his grandson, Jonathan Theorius, served in the United States Navy. And then his son, Karen's father, Robert Dinkle, or Bob, enlisted in the United States Army during the Second World War. And he rose to the rank of Sergeant First Class, which I find significant and speaks volumes, because this was at a time when African Americans were still struggling to overcome racial discrimination in the military, and of course in the nation at large. So Bob remained a reservist until the late 1970s, But he was also extremely active, as we've noted, in the Boy Scout movement. He led troops at the local level, but he also went on to lead at the district level. And in 1985, the Urban League of Rochester honored him with a Community Leadership Award for his dedication to this work. And it's worth pointing out that the Boy Scouts of America also honored him with its highest honor, which is the Silver Beaver Award, which is given to people for distinguished service to young people. Both of your brothers followed in his footsteps, first to join the Boy Scouts and then the U.S. Army. And your brother Bob Jr. was also a longstanding reservist, like his father, like your father, as well as an officer for the Rochester Police Department. And in that capacity, he was involved in early discussions in RPD about race relations, both within the force and between officers and African-American citizens. And ultimately, he was recognized with the Meritorious Public Service Award for his work. And then last but not least, of course, Karen, you yourself have been recognized for service to the community through various organizations like Baden Street Settlement and the Sunday School program at your church. So I guess my question at this point is, if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about what this idea of service or helping others meant to you or means to you and your family. And was this something that you openly discussed and that your parents sort of told you was a value, or was it more of an unspoken value imparted from one generation to the next?
Well, I can't remember how I went about the Baden Street, maybe just vaguely, my dad probably mentioned it to me, because with him being out in the working and so forth, and hearing about it, that I think he might have suggested it to me. And I don't remember at this point, what I did. All I know is that, I volunteered over there for many hours, and I enjoyed doing that because, just watching my dad and my mother, but my mother, she would help people through her home, in the home. She never was, she didn't work, and she was always a homebody, which she took care of the kids while my dad worked. But
that's work too.
Yes. And that's the hardest job I can say. But, just listening to them, as how I grew up, and I just grew up with thinking that I wanted to be a person that wanted to help others. And my goal was, I wanted to be a nurse. I didn't make it. I went to nursing school, but I had dropped out because I was working and going to school at the same time, and it was just a little too much. But, I could have gone back, but I didn't. But I say that I got close to it because I was a nurse's aide at a nursing home for about 7 or 8 years. And then I went to private duty and did private duty in the hospital. And then I did private duty in the home. And I took care of one lady for about 6 or 7 years, And so then after that, I came home and was the caregiver for, a few of my family members. Jerry and I both, caregivered his parents. And then we caregived my parents. And then after that, we caregived my uncle, my father's brother, until he passed away. And then I did a little bit of caregiving to my aunt, my uncle's wife, until she went into a nursing home, which that took a lot of burden off of me. But I I was only the only relative she had here in the city, and so I was there all the time. She was there about 8 or 9 years before she passed away. She had a niece, her brother's child, that lived in New Jersey, but she came here, like every year, like 2 or 3 times a year, and to visit her. But so, that was my thing, being a caregiver and, just wanted to take care of others. That's what my heart was all about.
That's great. Jerry, did you want to add anything?
Well, I was just going to say, it seems to be a family tradition on both sides that you extend a hand to people without strings attached. If you help someone, you help them. You don't expect something in return. You expect them to go on and help someone else. And that's basically the way both of us were raised. And, whether it carried over into community work or just in working with people in the community, it's like we help. And it's like one of the things that really bothers me now is with this coronavirus thing, we don't open our home to people like we used to. If you needed a place to stay for a week, a month, or in some cases 20 years, you'd come on in the door. And so nowadays, we have, being the senior citizens that we are, we have to be very careful of helping people because of the situation with the virus.
And
Sure.
it all comes back to you. I was saying to one of the persons that helps us, I was saying how I wish I could be out there, to help someone, and what she was doing is that her and another friend of hers from her church, they had, they started it was called COVID-19 Ministries, and people that they would know, and even in their family that were older people and couldn't get out to the store, So what they would do was they would collect they would go out and buy cleaning products, like the wipes, Lysol wipes, the spray, the hand sanitizer, whatever it was, and you didn't have to pay for it. And I just feel that, it may not be the same person, but it's coming back. We have, besides her, we have about 2 or 3 other people that bring stuff by to us. It all comes back. If you think about it, what you do, it's, how do I want to say it?
The good that you do comes back many times.
Yes, the good that you do comes back many times, and you think about it, because that at some point in time in life, not everyone, but they're going to need a helping hand, and you feel that, not that you do it for that reason, but you just feel that, the things that are being done for you, these things are coming back to you 100%.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that idea that you get back what you put in.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I wish we could stay and talk forever, but unfortunately we cannot. So I just want to thank you both for taking time to talk with us today. I always enjoy my conversations with you all, so I appreciate that you were able to do this with us. Thank you, Emily, for your involvement and help and excellent contributions to the exhibit as well as this presentation. And I wanted to remind the folks at home, our exhibit is still up. It's on display on the 2nd floor of the Rundell Memorial Library building. So when you're able to visit us again, please, we strongly encourage you to come by and see it. It's really good. Many thanks to everybody for joining us, for tuning in. That's all.
And we'd like to thank you and Emily and the rest of the library staff that took 2 minivan loads of stuff and turned it into something that was beautiful and educational.
Yes, it was beautiful.
And it was amazing to see all of that put together the way it was. And you guys did an incredible job.
Because I didn't know that this would happen to my father's things. I really didn't. I just really thought that, I'm going to have to get rid of these things, I can't have them around forever because my thing is that if something happens to me or us together, that I don't want to leave the grandchildren or anyone else to clean this house out because they're going to throw things away. And I'm so pleased that Lisa, was in the position that she was in, that suggested that, and we followed through on it. And so now I feel, even with my things, I have a lot of my things in order that I might, not that they have to go on display, but I might, donate some of the things, to the library.
Well, definitely keep us in mind. We'll look forward to that.
Well, also, another offshoot of that was that people that came and saw the exhibit started to think about some of the stuff that they have stuffed in the attic. And they were saying, I have pictures from that period and all these other things. And I think I better go look at this stuff,
I just want to put in there, Lisa had a big part in getting this started.
She did. So thank you, Lisa.
All right. And thank you too. And
Yes.
like I said, the entire library staff that worked on this.
Yes.
All right. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right, that was it. So I guess Kathy is going to be monitoring and taking questions from the chat. So feel free to ask away.
So we have I'll read some of the comments while people are thinking about their questions if they have any. Dr. Sadler says, wow, I never knew these things about Grandpa Dinkle. Melinda shared a resource at the University of Rochester in the Kodak collection at Fight at the U of R. And she included some links and then some links to the Franklin Florence papers are included in the chat too, if you wanted to check on those. And it said, this is fascinating to hear about local history from the perspective of just an ordinary family that moves along. So thanks for sharing the links. Bill was wondering is Doris Price related to Charlie Price? I don't know if somebody can answer that.
Karen and Jared, do you want to unmute? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Charlie Price is distantly related to Doris and Ted Price. They all came up through Scottsville, Wheatland, from Culpeper County, Virginia. So in a way, they're not closely related, but they are relatives.
Could Jerry turn on his camera?
No, it's been turned off by the host.
Okay, let me hang on.
Yeah,
There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Another comment was quiet grab a Dinkle made it outside the house to hold a sign for a march? ? Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you for an awesome presentation on a Rochester hidden treasure. Excellent program. Thank you. This was fascinating. Got to know Bob Jr. Immaculate. Here's one question. What was the connection to Wheatland? There is a large population of African-American families in Mumford and Caledonia, more than in Greece or Irondequoit or Chile. What was the attraction to Mumford and Caledonia?
The attraction to Mumford and Caledonia and the whole Wheatland area was there were gypsum mines there. And a couple people left Wheatland and they went to Culpeper County, Virginia to recruit after the Civil War. And the families came up from Culpeper County. And every year now, a lot of the African-American residents of Caledonia return to Culpeper County for reunions. And let's see, It was the work. It was a place to get work, because originally John Dinkle's name was Hezekiah Frazier, and when he came up to Wheatland, he changed his name to John Dinkle.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
This follow up to that was, it says Poles, Majors, Banks families. Is that?
I'm not sure, but I know in Caledonia, if the Big Springs Museum there, the local museum, they do an African American exhibit of the founding families, founding African American families. And the thing is that since it was a limited area, most are related.
Okay. From retired Sergeant Stevenson, it says, Bobby and I worked together on RPD, and I never got to hear all of this wonderful history from your mentor and dear friend. Thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you for coming to the presentation.
Anybody else have any questions they want to ask?
You could introduce Lisa, who is also, I think you talked about her involvement in this, and she's got her picture up there. So you can thank Lisa for.
Well, we were going to ignore Lisa because she abandoned us and moved to Massachusetts.
Maine.
Across the state line. Yeah, Lisa, I'm sure is still there. Lisa is a local Rochester historian. She researched the Dosenbach family, which was her family, and they were also the musicians that started the County Parks Band, and they played for George Eastman. Oh, she's supposed to be coming up, I guess. And her husband Bob, he's also sitting there, and they both put up with us and all the dusty boxes and everything else.
They're very dear and close friends of ours.
Yes.
Jerry and
Nice.
yeah, let me just say, Jerry and Karen, being your friends has just been the highlight of my life, really, and certainly of my time in Rochester. So everything was just a pleasure. And Michelle and her team and Emily, you guys did a phenomenal job of this exhibit, more than we ever could have hoped for. So thank you out to everybody, and love to all of you.
Wonderful. Jane says, thank you for the answer about Mumford. My husband had many African-American classmates, and I always wondered what the attraction to that area was. Somebody, Dr. Sadler would like to know what part of Massachusetts. I'm guessing for Lisa.
We are living in Winchendon, Massachusetts. I love Rochester. It was a hard decision for us to leave Rochester, but we moved here to be near to my daughter and her grandson. So COVID made things all about family. But we're going to be back and visit all the time. So I'll see you in the library, Michelle and Emily, and Jerry and Karen. I will be there at your house to poke through your things and see what I can find.
Fantastic.
While we're waiting for another question to come in, I do want everyone to know, as of this week, actually, the Central Library is reopened to the public. So that hallway where the exhibit is open now. Unfortunately, our division is seeing people by appointment only starting next week. There's a form up on the website if you want to come visit us. But the exhibit is open without an appointment. So just wanted to put that out there.
Awesome.
I want to put in a little plug for the Greece Historical Society. A couple of years ago, we got a grant and had Bureau Associate write a story about architect James Johnson. That book will be for sale next month. But we got a state award for that. And with that book, we've just gotten several grants, and we've now started a project to document the history and work of Thomas Boyd, the first African-American architect in Rochester. So that will be done in about a year, but that should be a pretty exciting project.
Well, Thomas Boyd was also one of Karen's cousins.
Oh, okay. Well, they may contact you then.
Well, and
Oh,
Any other questions or comments?
somebody just asked, will we record this?
Yep, it is being recorded, and at some point, Bill will put it up on the Greece Historical's website.
And as a point too, if anybody, I saw some references there, you can always copy and file the chat if you wish. If you go to the bottom right-hand corner of chat, there's a save chat, and that will save it into your computer file. Because I know there's some references there to the U of R files and that, if you want to go back to that.
And I'll make sure to write those down and send them to you so you can include them in the.
Oh, all right.
also,
Okay. I see a hand up there. No.
Yes, Jim?
I'd just like to mention Kenyatta Berry's family was from Caledonia, Mumford. And she spoke at the Little Theater a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 5.
Yeah.
And she works with Henry Louis Gates, PBS. I forget the name of that show. I believe was on Tuesday nights.
Finding Your Roots.
Finding Your Roots.
Yeah.
Oh, that's on next. That's on now at 8 o'clock. So.
also, I'd like to get in a plug. I'm right now going over my manuscript of the history of the Button family from 1825 to 2015. And it's called The Rough Side of the Mountain. And it goes from slave ship to suburbia.
Jerry, while we're doing plugs, do you want to mention the book?
Yes, and there's also a new book out. It's called A Shot in the Moonlight. It's about George Denning, who was my great-great-grandfather, who lived in Franklin, Kentucky. He was a former slave, and because he was very successful at farming, and he increased his acreage and the number of animals he had on the farm, his white neighbors gave him an ultimatum of leaving the area. And when he didn't, they fired and they shot him 3 times, and he returned fire and killed one of the members of the mob. And he was arrested. He turned himself into the sheriff, and the sheriff knew that the lynch mob would be there, so the sheriff transferred him to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where the sheriff there transported him to Louisville under federal protection. And he was charged with murder. He was convicted of manslaughter, but the governor of Kentucky said that even a black man had the right to defend his home against invaders. And so he was given a pardon by the governor. He moved across the river to Jeffersonville, Indiana, the thing that really struck me when I was doing the research on that is that my great-great-grandmother was one of the children who ran out of this building when the mob set the house on fire. So September 1892, my existence could have been wiped out in just a flash. But the book has, a reporter from Miami did a book, and it's now available. I just bought it the other day. I was hoping for a free copy, but I had to buy a copy, but my cousin in Indiana, he worked with the author to confirm most of the information there. And a lot of the research that I did went into helping document my ancestors' struggle. He also won a lawsuit against the people that testified against him at the murder trial, but he won an award of $50,000, which is about $1.5 million today. But as is the case, he couldn't collect because he'd have to come back to the area where he would be murdered to collect from these people.
A question is the book available at the African American bookstore that's newly opened on State Street?
I'm not sure. It should be. It was published January 26th, so it should be available at every bookstore.
Awesome. Anything else? Well, I have to say it was fascinating history to me that I just so enjoyed hearing. So thank you for sharing your family's history with us.
And thank you. And we can give a silent, if you go to reactions down there, you can give an applause. That's the best we can do on Zoom, or you can just clap.
I would like to thank everyone for giving us the opportunity to tell the story, and the library, and as I said, Lisa and the library staff for helping us get the information out.
And I would like to thank a few people that are on that I know that one lady that's on, Wanda Ellis. She's like a sister to me, and I was surprised when I seen her name up there, but I'm glad that she was able to join us. And there was another Junior Fontanet. I was, glad to see him there also. And along with our niece, Dr. Sadler.
And Tony.
And our nephew, Tony. And if there's anyone else I missed and didn't see, I'm just glad that you were able to join us. And especially my first time in doing something like this.
And also we'd like to thank the Greece Historical Society
Yes.
for allowing us the opportunity to present our story.
Well, I always like to say, I want people to go away and say, I learned something today from one of our lectures, and I hope people do. I appreciate the few people. It looks like we're starting to lose people, but I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope maybe you join us on some of our other programs. And, in the summertime, we hope to have some outdoor lectures and classes. So we started that last year where everybody had to bring their own lawn chair, and we had a class outdoors. So we're doing things differently. And we do have a museum that's open on Sunday afternoons starting in March. It's a local museum on the history of the town of Greece. So please stop by if you can on a Sunday afternoon in March. So I think we're done. And thank you, everybody. And hope to see you at another program. And Vicki and Bing and Jane. Thanks, Michelle and Emily.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice night.
Bing, goodbye. See you later. John.